Yes, Matt, warm welcome back to Northumberland as the sun sets, the turbines turning lazily on the western horizon here. New energy, of course, and new possibilities and opportunities. Well, there's no such thing, as a quiet week during a climate crisis. Obviously, today the day that the Climate Assembly reports back to Parliament. A remarkable exercise this. The Parliament going out and saying, look, we want you, the people, representative sample, come and tell us how on earth we get this country to carbon neutral 2050 or even before that if we can. Today, they told the government their answer. Not only that, right here in Northumberland this very week, a remarkable victory for local campaigners after years of efforts to get the government to say no to an open cast pit in this beauty spot and thus deliver on its legal pledges, don't forget, to cut our carbons. And all the while globally, as if we needed reminding, the fires continue, the world burns. This time, of course, in the western United States, from California to Oregon, more than 90 fires burning out of control. So this is the Climate Assembly, endorsed by no fewer than 6 parliamentary select committees. It's the most thorough attempt ever to ascertain just what people want from our government to get us to carbon neutral by 2050 at the very latest. A legal obligation, don't forget.
I think this assembly really represents the very best of civil society. It's people from across the whole country who've come together, giving up their time to shape the future on climate action. And this is the most important issue of our time. On that, I think we are all absolutely agreed.
Much rhetoric in this report about moving urgently with consensus, but some concrete actions demanded too. Key among them, a progressive aviation tax. The more you fly, the more you pay. Staying with transport, it's clear people want to see a much faster incentivised push towards electric transport, private and public. Alongside that, our homes and workplaces are one of the biggest single emitters of greenhouse gases. People want a massive rolling programme to speed up decarbonising where we live and where we work.
San Francisco, little post-apocalyptic orange going on.
The urgency to act literally burned into the San Francisco sky as fires rage across California and Oregon. Hotter heat waves, extended droughts, an ever-lengthening fire season. Oh, and 2 feet of snow, almost unheard of in the Rocky Mountains this early in September. All of this, the climate extremes long predicted by science, long ignored by leaders in key countries like the US, Brazil, India, China and Australia. And by coincidence, all of this on the very day the WWF launched its annual Living Planet report. It reveals population sizes of mammals, birds, fish, amphibians and reptiles have fallen an average of 68% globally since 1970. More than 2/3 in less than just 50 years. But of course, it is also about what is going on right here, right now in the UK. Wild, windy and wonderful Druridge Bay in Northumberland may well be, but it could also be that this place goes down in history as the site of one of the first and most significant victories of people holding a government to its legally binding promises to cut carbon. In the bay this afternoon, dolphins break surface. For years, campaigners have fought against plans to build one of the UK's biggest open-cast coal mines just inland from the bay. Local cafe owner Duncan Lawrence was central to the marathon fight against the proposed mine.
I couldn't be happier. We've worked so hard for such a long time. A core team of people. We've involved some really important people along the way, and I can't express my elation really. It's just fantastic. A lifetime's achievement almost.
The company says the decision's absurd, meaning we'll have to import coal now at even greater carbon output. But that may prove short-term. Industry, from steel onwards, is well on the road to abandoning coal forever. Hedge funds and big global capital see coal and increasingly oil and gas as toxic against renewables. So the Battle of Druridge Bay may be the first of many where developers come up hard against our new legal carbon commitments. The action now shifts from east to west coast. Over in Cumbria, where plans to open a deep shaft coal mine in Whitehaven remain alive, for now. Well, I'm joined here on the beach by Mark Robson, who was a member of that Climate Assembly, and also by Chris Stark, who's CEO of the Committee on Climate Change. Good evening to both of you. Thanks for joining us. Easy to be cynical in this day and age about politics, Mark, but this has genuinely changed your life and the way you see the planet, right?
Yes, that's when I participated in the assembly. It's opened my eyes just to how big a scale or problem that we actually have got. And I just I hope that the education I was given at the assembly, we can kind of pass that on to everybody else.
You didn't consider climate crisis before this, really?
No, I knew it was a thing, but I didn't. It wasn't something that I actively looked at and thought that, I'll be getting involved in. It just got to the stage when that letter came through the door, and it made me think about my children, my grandchildren. I thought I need to do something about this now.
Right, so you need to act. Well, Chris Stark, that's the point from someone like Mark, who is involved directly in this assembly. From your point of view, what can this, given it's effectively sponsored by 6 select committees in Parliament, what can this really do genuinely to push on not just the debate but action?
Well, it's an amazing thing to have this new information from the Climate Assembly. I mean, my day job is to try and put together the kind of technical assessment about the steps that we need to take to get to net zero. We've been doing that for years. We've been building that technical assessment, building an understanding of this science. But this is brand new information from 108 real people living in the UK about their lived experience, their perception, their understanding, their recommendations of what we need to do to get to net zero overall. It's fantastic as a complement to that technical work. And it makes this really, really compelling, because the overall package, if I were a minister, I want to do this. This is a real kind of achievable and practical package overall. So I hope it's a real call to arms.
Do you think that what they've come up with today, I mean, a tax on aviation, if you like, the more you fly, the more you pay, is there any real likelihood, particularly during COVID, when people are saying, goodness me, we kind of solved aviation emissions, that's what people say, not necessarily true, but do you think there's a real sense in which suggestions and demands like that will be taken seriously at government level?
I really do, actually. I mean, this government is committed to a lot. I mean, the present government stood with a manifesto that had this pledge of net zero emissions by 2050 at the heart of the environmental pledges. And the Treasury has committed to looking at the tax regime, at the ways in which we need to pay for that transition to net zero overall. They'll be looking right across the piece at all the fiscal tools, including potentially these kind of changes to tax that might change our behaviour, the way that we travel. Also, right across the piece, we look across into some of the other sectors, that, the incentives that are there to decarbonise and all the other sectors too. And the Assembly looked at all of these things, and it's really good political cover for a minister that wants to make these changes and needs the support. The public will support these changes, I think, is the kind of main message coming out of this.
Right. Chris Stark there was talking about the need to go across the piece on this, a comprehensive viewpoint on this. Being in Northumberland, what happens when you leave an industry behind? They close the pits here, they close the coal industry. You know the effect that can have if you don't take people with you. We've got to take people with us on this journey.
Yes, we do. I mean, it happened to my granddad. I mean, he was a miner, and obviously in the 80s when the pits closed and everything, they were left with no retraining, no reskilling, and they just had to go off and find jobs elsewhere. And from my point of view, and from the assemblies, the principles that we came up with was to make sure that we don't actually leave anybody behind in the workforce. So what we're looking at doing is reskilling, retraining engineers. So from my point of view, instead of me fitting gas meters now...
I know, you're working for the devil.
Well,
I'm joking, of course.
No.
But seriously, emissions from homes are a huge sector in this problem.
That's right. And so going forward, what they'll do is they retrain and reskill me. Instead of me fitting gas meters, I'll be fitting heat pumps or electrical vehicle points. And that's what we've got to ensure, that not just my business, also other parts of industry do the same thing, and they retrain those engineers to become the engineers of the future, or the workers of the future in green technologies.
Right. Well, Chris Stark in Glasgow there, you heard Mark's experience there in personal terms, how his life is going to change, just as his grandfather's have changed with deindustrialisation. How do we bring people in a consensual way with us? How does the government bring everyone so that people aren't left behind in what's an industrial revolution almost?
Well, you look at the results of this assembly. I mean, I think that's where we should start. I mean, this is one of the first times we've ever had information like this. This is data, as far as I'm concerned, for my job. This tells us a lot about where there is public support for the steps that are necessary to get to net zero. I mean, what's fascinating to me, when we look across all these various things that must be done in every sector of the economy, changes even to lifestyle, is that when you package them all up, they actually look quite similar to the kind of technical assessments and recommendations that we've been giving to the government as well over the last 10 years and more. And I think that's really strong evidence that actually there is a consensus now about some of the steps that need to be taken. And if the information is there and the education is there for people, then there's also public support for those steps. And it's wonderful to have that from such a really authoritative source.
Chris Stark in Glasgow and Mark Robson here on the beach. We'll have to leave it there. Gentlemen, thanks very much indeed. Well, now, not many